devices for the message this morning. We're glad you'll be with us as we explore God's Word together. Fall is here. It's the season of autumn, and I don't know about you, but I enjoy seeing all the beautiful colors, the different landscapes as you drive around, the contrasts from one thing to another. The fields are one color and the trees all different colors. As I drive around in my colorblind state, it's great to have Deb around too to say, look at the reds over there. It's like, oh, that's what that is. And it's fun. I think some of you may enjoy the colors even more than I do, but I get a lot of good out of seeing that. Farmers are bringing in crops at the end of the season, and people are picking apples and other fruits. And one of the things that our family looks forward to is going to the Trussler farm and getting some apple cider this time of year. It's fantastic. As we were talking about it the other day before we went and picked some up last Saturday, and Beth said it's very delicious. That's the expert opinion. So you might want to think about getting some apple cider this time of year. It excites me. End of the month, no more available at Trussler Farms. Hey, thinking about seasons changing led me to 1 Samuel 25. We've been looking at the life of David and some of the narratives in 1 Samuel around his life. And in 1 Samuel 25, there's some big changes going on. And I want us to turn there. If you have a Bible, there's some in the chairs in front of you, or look it up on your device, and you can follow along. That'll be our primary text this morning as we go through our message. Samuel chapter 25, 1 Samuel, verse 1, says, Now Samuel died. So you know that the rest of the book of 1 Samuel was written by someone else, because this is the end of Samuel. Samuel died, and Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. All of Israel assembled. Have you been to any big funerals lately where there were lots of people there? Boy, we saw a funeral not long ago where it seemed like not only all the people of the nation were paying attention when Queen Elizabeth's funeral happened, but the world. They figured like over 1 billion people watched her funeral. She left an amazing legacy. She impacted many lives. She lived a faithful life, a life of faith in God, and she tried to do good and to serve people all her days. And Samuel was a person like that, who loved God, who was faithful to God, who served God with his whole heart all his days, and he impacted the entire nation. Everyone came out and assembled. What kind of gathering would that have been? There's only one other time that the Bible tells us that the whole nation mourned for one of its fallen leaders, one of those who'd gone on. And that was when Aaron, the first priest, died. So this is pretty significant, very significant. The death of Samuel brings in a new era. Things are going to change in the land. He was no longer the political leader. That was Saul, the king. But he had been the political leader and the spiritual leader, and now he was gone. But it led me to think a little bit about my legacy, your legacy. Who's going to come to our funeral? Whose lives have we touched? Have we impacted? Whose life is better because we've been part of their life? How many people will say, you know what? You touched me in a way that made a difference for good and for God in my life. Have we been faithful all our days? Are we spending our time building relationships and investing in other people and making an impact in this world for God, for his kingdom, for his glory? Or are we more about just focusing on ourselves, our little kingdom, what's good for us? Maybe even with the influences of COVID, our circle of influence has gotten much smaller. We don't go out as much, we don't see as many people, we don't talk to as many people, we don't touch as many people with our lives. And as I read this about Samuel, it calls me again to say, hey, come on, there's maybe more that God wants me to do in making an impact in this world than what I'm doing right now. Maybe there's some people God wants me to reach out to touch in some way that I haven't yet. And maybe you want to consider that too. God, what kind of legacy am I building? Or have I kind of taken a break from building any legacy at all? Partly because of what's gone on in the last couple of years all around me. David moved down into the desert of Paran. Now, when we read that David moved, It doesn't sound like a very big deal, does it? But if you look back a couple of chapters, after David fled from Saul and went out into the wilderness, his relatives, his father, his brothers, and all of his other relatives, they rallied to David. They picked up and moved and joined David out in the wilderness. It says many others who were discontented or in trouble with the government, with Saul, who wasn't always rational in his decisions, they gathered and rallied around David too. There's over 400 men following David in the wilderness. So when David moved, David plus his entourage, at least 400 men, and several of them, many of them, would have been married and had children, so 1,000, maybe 2,000 people. Actually, later in this chapter, we're going to see that there's 600 men following David now, so maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people pick up and they move after Samuel dies. Why did David decide he needed to move? He's getting further away from where Saul lives, in Gibeah up north. He's going further south. Probably feels like, one layer of protection has been removed because somebody who cared for him and protected him and prayed for him, Samuel, is now gone. And Saul might just go a little more off the rails without Samuel around to help keep him in check. Anyway, David gets up and he moves in the southern direction to get further away from Saul. Then we read, a certain man in Maon, who had property there at Carmel, was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing at Carmel. So this guy might be the Elon Musk of the day. One of those kind of characters, right? Multi-millionaire, maybe a billionaire. This guy was so rich, it was crazy. And he was shearing his sheep, which was a time of celebration. They would be throwing a big party. They would slaughter a few sheep and have a great festival around the sheep shearing. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite, a descendant of Caleb. If someone were to sum your character, your nature, your personality up in just a couple of words, just a few words, what might they say about you? Would they say you're kind, that you're generous, that you're faithful, loyal, joyful, hardworking? What might they say about you? Are you thoughtful? Are you... fill in the blanks. It doesn't tell us a whole lot about Nabal here, but decidedly different from what we get as the impression of Samuel and his life and the impact he had on people. It says he was surly, he was wicked, he was evil, he was churlish, he was rude, he was crude, he was nasty, he was mean to everyone. He was hard to please. In fact, no one could please this guy. He was awful. And then in stark contrast, complete contrast to his character and nature, is his wife, Abigail, who's not only beautiful but called intelligent. The word that's translated intelligent means of good understanding. She had insight, she had wisdom, she was sensible and sensitive to what was going on around her. She was caring about other people, and she worked for the good of those around her. Abigail was, somebody that Nabal did not deserve. Let's just go there, okay? She was an amazing woman, and a complete contrast to her wicked and evil husband who had such a hard heart. She wasn't just intelligent in terms of, good in school with math and other subjects, if they had those back then. But she had an emotional IQ and a social IQ, and she knew how to fit in with groups and work with people, and she had the whole package in terms of getting along with others. It also mentions Caleb as an ancestor of Nabal. And if you remember Caleb, he was one of the 2 spies, 12 spies were sent into Canaan, into Palestine, when Moses led the people out of Egypt, the Exodus, and they came to the Promised Land. Caleb and Joshua were the 2 spies that when everyone else was saying, no, we shouldn't go, we're going to lose, we can't win a battle there, They said, trust God, follow God, believe in God, do what God says. Don't worry about all the negative reports you're hearing. Trust God, follow God, love God, listen to God. That's the kind of man Caleb was. And now here his ancestor, or his descendant, thank you. Wouldn't come to my mind. Was kind of the opposite, right? There's no godliness in this man. He's evil and wicked-hearted. In contrast to his predecessor. Verse 4, while David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours, all those flocks and herds that you have, may they all be healthy too. I hear it's sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not mistreat them. The whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of yours ended up missing. Ask your own servants, they will tell you this. Therefore, be favorable toward my men, these 10 men that I'm sending, and the others you know exist. Since we come at a festive time, please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them, whatever you can spare, whatever leftovers or extras you might have. Imagine somebody knocking on your door after your Thanksgiving dinner saying, you got anything left? Can you share a little bit of turkey and gravy and stuffing? I was so blessed this week. We didn't have a big turkey dinner on Thanksgiving, and I had a phone call with a friend and mentioned that I didn't have that. And they sent me some turkey and dressing and gravy and potatoes, and I was, thank you so much. I won't mention any names, Bonnie, but thank you. What a blessing. What a blessing. And then David's saying, hey, I know you've got tons of food prepared. Listen, is there anything you guys can spare? Can you share a little bit with us? Now, you might think, it's hard to plan meals for our family. Especially if you have 2 or 3 kids, and if they're picky eaters, and if your family got up to there's a family in Roseville with 15 kids. Imagine planning a meal for 17 every night. Well, here, there's multiple families. There's 600 men following David, and it's kind of weighing on him a little bit that, he's kind of the leader and providing for all these people. And so he asks Nabal for a favor. Hey, we did good to you. Now, please, can you do something good back for us? David and his men had shared pasture land with Nabal and his men. They had provided protection for them. These were rough days. There were raiders coming from other nations, and they would steal flocks and herds, and there were ruffians out there who would just grab 1 or 2 for their own good. There were, as we heard in the story of David, there were lions and bears and other wild animals that might attack your flocks or your herds as well. And so it wouldn't be unusual for someone with 4,000 livestock to end up missing 1 or 2 over several months, would it? And yet not a single solitary loss from any source for Nabal while his men were pasturing the flocks near David and his men. They provided a great service. Wow. That got me thinking. David wasn't being paid for this. His men weren't being paid for this. They were kind of like volunteers, like a neighborhood watch group. They're not just looking out for their own property, but they're watching everybody else's property on the street too. They're making sure that there's nobody breaking in, any suspicious people are reported, and you kind of neighborhood watch David and his men. And it got me thinking about the work that we do too. Not a single thing was missing. Wouldn't it be easy to think, Nabal wouldn't mind. He's not going to know even. How many days does it count them to count all their sheep and goats? We can just take 1, maybe even 1 a week, and they'd never know the difference. What are our attitudes towards our work? I wonder if anybody's ever thought, my corporation, my boss, they won't notice if a few pens go missing, or if I take a ream of paper every now and then, or what kind of integrity do we live with in our work environment? Do we give our best effort every day? Are we trying to fill the time in a meaningful way? Or do we look to do as little as we can, or kind of cut corners, or pad expenses, or take supplies? Like the integrity that David and his men showed, not even being employed, but in this environment, I think is exemplary for all of us. And it calls us to a higher standard, that we live like this too, in whatever work or volunteer positions we may have to fulfill. David's men were waiting for a response from Nabal. How would he respond? Well, he responds according to his nature and character. In verse 10 it says, Nabal replied, "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the sheep, the meat that I have slaughtered for my shearers, and give it to the men coming from who knows where?" That was his answer. Get lost! They're not giving you anything. David, who's David? I don't respect him. I don't respect anyone. I'm all about me. I ain't giving nothing to nobody. So he sends them packing. And David's men, they leave. They turn around, they go back to David, and they tell him every single word that Nabal said. Because he made a strong impression. Gives you an idea of the attitude probably that he said it with, doesn't it? And David said to his men, well, you know what? I kind of expected that might be the reply we get. We'll just let it go. Don't worry about it. This is David, right? We all know David. If you know the stories of David, if you've read the narratives, we skipped over a few chapters. We'll probably go back and touch on some of that. But Saul was chasing David. King Saul wanted to kill David. David, at multiple points, at least two that are recorded, had an opportunity where he could have killed Saul, who was out to kill David, but he didn't. He withheld his hand. He refrained from hurting Saul in any way, leave alone killing him to preserve his own life. He was a man of patience. He was a man of honor. He was a man of integrity. He was level-headed. He didn't jump in. He wasn't impulsive. When you look at David, that's kind of who he seems to be, doesn't it? But that's not how he responds here. How many offenses were there from Saul, and David never struck back? But now Nabal offends him. And how does David respond? Look at verse 13 if you have it open. David said to his men, "Each of you strap on your sword." So they did, and David strapped his on as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. That tells you again, it was a time of ruffians and raiders, and you didn't want to leave your supplies sitting in a pile there because they were going to disappear. They left 200 men guarding the supplies, which reinforces again how valuable the service was that they provided to Nabal in protecting all that he had from disappearing. David has multiple options available to him here, and he chooses the most radical, the most violent possible. He's going to kill Nabal and all the males of his household. He's going to wipe his name off the annals of Israel. There'll be nobody left of his family, no males at least. His angry reaction is anything but gracious or godly. David, a man after God's own heart, a man who's celebrated by people of faith all over the world, and this was his reaction to being offended, to being slighted, to being ignored when he made a reasonable request. How do we respond to people when they hurt us, when they offend us, when they say something that we don't like, when they don't perform the way we think they should, when they neglect us, when we feel overlooked or underappreciated? How easily do we take offense? And how big is our response? Do we go ballistic? Do we go nuclear on people? I hope not. But you know what? I realize that while my default, I've mentioned this before, I heard a guy, Larry Lee, talk about this whole idea of taking offense, of being hurt and offended by other people, and how we respond to it. And he says he made up his mind ahead of time that the next time somebody offended him, he was going to respond with mercy and grace and forgiveness. Because that's how he wanted other people to respond to him when he stepped on their toes, when he offended them, when he said or did something to hurt them. He wanted mercy and grace and forgiveness. So that's how he was going to respond every time to anyone who ever would offend him. And I said, yes, that's the kind of person I want to be too. No matter who says what or does what, who hurts me or offends me, I don't want to take it personally. I don't want to take offense. I want to respond with grace and forgiveness and mercy towards that person. And then, not long ago, something happened, and I realized that my default is broken. And somebody hurt and offended me, and I went, boom! It's like they lit a fuse. For some of us, we're great 99% of the time. But maybe there's one person who gets under our skin. One person who, they just have to look at us the wrong way, and we're just instantly angry. Maybe it's your kid who talks back to you. Or when your parents use a certain tone of voice. Or, hey, if you're married, who's the person who you are most likely to hurt or offend? Who's the person who's most likely to hurt or offend you? If you spend a lot of time together as a married couple, I'm sure no one has hurt or offended Deb more often than I have. And the opposite is true too. We step on each other's toes every now and then. We think almost the same about nothing. And coming from different perspectives makes for a lot of headbutting. That's why you often see us rubbing our head. No. And there's room for and need for a lot of apologies. But we can't allow ourselves to get to the point where we just fly off the handle. Like David did here. Where we're ready to take somebody's head off because of what they said or what they did. We need to be patient and kind and loving. Why doesn't David respond to Nabal like he did to Saul? I don't know. Why don't some of us respond to our family members the way we respond to people at work? We're so much nicer to people at work. I was talking to a parent after Kids Night Out a week ago and said, oh, your kids are great kids. She says, maybe when they come here. But at home, it's a different story. Do we treat our own family worse than we treat the people around us? We need to repent. Say, God, help us. When I see this response of David, it reminds me of that verse in James. 2 verses, 19 and 20, chapter 1. We've highlighted this multiple times in the last year. It's one I want everyone to know by heart. Let everyone be quick to listen. Say that, quick to listen. Slow to speak. And slow to become angry. Slow to become angry. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Because it says human anger, our anger, does not accomplish the righteousness, does not produce the righteous life that God desires. Your anger, my anger, it almost never ends up in a good place. It almost never ends up accomplishing God's purposes. Very seldom is our anger truly righteous and accomplishing God's purposes. Sometimes when we're going up against great evil, it might be so. But normally the people we're angry with aren't great evil, although Nabal falls in that category here. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Verse 14, one of the servants of Abigail, one of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, what happened. David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings. But he hurled insults at them. That these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Night and day, they were like a wall around us. The whole time we were herding sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him. Nabal didn't listen to anyone. And it was a sign of his wicked, twisted, hardened heart. Nobody could get through to this guy. And as I read that, I had to think again, Lord, what's my heart like? Am I even a little bit like that? I don't want to be like that. Who can talk to you? Who do you listen to? Who can speak into your life? Who can confront you when maybe you're a little bit off God's path for you? Saying, you know what, your attitude might be a little off right now. I'm not sure the way you're handling this situation is what Jesus would want for you. Are we open to people correcting us or instructing us or even rebuking us? Do we humble ourselves before the people around us? Do we invite people even to speak into our lives? Say, hey, is there anything I need to work on? What do you see in my life? There's so many verses in the Bible that talk about being open to rebuke, open to correction, listening to advice, and how that makes our lives better, that makes us wiser. We need to take that to heart. Nabal was such a wicked man, he wouldn't listen to anyone. If we're stiff-necked, if we won't listen to other people, we set ourselves up for a hard fall. Abigail acted quickly, it says in verse 18. She acted quickly. Most of the time in life we have time to think things through, to plan, to be very purposeful. But every now and then there's a situation that arises that requires immediate action. We don't have a lot of time to think and prepare. We just have to do right now. And she's in one of those situations. Lives are hanging in the balance. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine. She knew there's a lot of guys, a lot of people out there. 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, like 60 pounds, 27 kilograms, 100 cakes of raisins, 200 cakes of pressed figs, and load them on donkeys. She told her servants, go on ahead, I'll follow you. But she did not tell her husband Nabal. Why? Because he was a wicked man with a hard heart, and he would have forbidden her from doing it. He would have done everything he could to stop her. Generally, as couples and as families, we need to work together. We need to talk about things. We need to plan things together. We need to agree about things. But there may be a time when somebody's entrenched in an evil path that we need to bypass that person, even in a marriage situation. Not often, but if somebody's bent on evil, she did the right thing here by not telling him. Otherwise, he would have been dead by the end of the day, along with all the other males there. She came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine where David and his men were descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said, it's been useless. Oh my, watching this fellow's property in the wilderness for no reason, for no purpose at all. Nothing good is going to come of it. He's paying back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him. David's heart was set on vengeance. When your heart and my heart are set on vengeance, on getting even with somebody else, that's almost never a good or godly thing. We need to forgive people. We need to let things go. We hold on to it. It just ties us up in knots. It poisons our spirit and our soul. And here's David about to murder a bunch of people. Only one person had offended him. He's going to wipe them all out. Kind of scary thinking about where he went with all this. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, pardon your servant, my lord. Let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He's just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. As for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. And now, my lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed, and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my lord be like Nabal. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my lord be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, and the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. Wow. The eloquence, the wisdom, the way she's bringing in, tying these different threads together. What a great speech she's making here. And she's aware of what's going on in the world around her, about Saul going after David and all the rest of it. It's a great speech. She's touching all the high points and being very effective. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed. I think that resonated with David. My Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed. Or having avenged himself. When the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant. David said to Abigail, praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. He gives glory to God again. David regularly does this. Gives the praise and the glory to God for the good things that happen. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day, and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, no one, not one male belonging to Nabal, would have been left by daybreak. What a difference between Nabal and David. What state of mind was David in when Abigail met him in that mountain ravine? He's charging down the ravine with 400 men in tow, all of them with their swords strapped to their side, ready to destroy Nabal and all the males associated with him. Bloodlust, vengeance. He is hot, white hot with anger. And still he listens. He listens. Not many people I know, when they're that angry, can be rational in their thinking and back down this quickly from I'm going to kill hundreds of people to, wow, you're right. You're right, absolutely right. What I was bent on doing would not have been good. Well, Abigail goes home. She doesn't tell Nabal that night because he's drunk and partying. And next morning she tells him, and he has probably a stroke, and then a few days later he dies. And David rejoices that God brings down on Nabal judgment for his wickedness. The question I guess I want to end with is, who are we most like? Are we ever like Nabal? Do we ever get in that spot where we just won't listen to anybody? Where our hearts are hard and we can't be redirected? Are we like David, where most of the time we do it right, we have a good heart and we're patient, and yet once in a while we just, maybe it's just with a certain person or certain situations that we fly off the handle and you know what? We hurt, we offend, we maybe damage relationships with the people we love the most in those moments. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Hopefully all of us are at least a little bit like Abigail, looking for ways to make peace, looking for ways to build bridges, looking for ways to minimize conflict, to de-escalate situations. Blessed are the peacemakers, Jesus said, for they shall inherit the kingdom of God. David allowed an offense to turn him into a murderous mindset. When is the last time somebody offended us and we reacted poorly, or we overreacted? Or maybe we're still holding on to an offense from somebody who hurt us, who offended us, who slighted us, who disrespected us. And God's nudging you this morning saying, you need to let that go. You need to forgive that person. You need to extend mercy and grace.